Hello friends. In a recent video, I talked about the mass vanishing of all ancient Sheikah technology and how it seemingly disappeared without a trace by the time of Tears of the Kingdom. While I feel that I was able to scrape up enough in-game evidence to offer up a handful of explanations, one line of thinking has been brought to my attention by quite a few commenters. An alternative theory that isn't really one I had considered, but is apparently quite a common train of thought based on just how many people suggested the idea to me. So I wanted to talk about that. But before we jump into that, I wanted to take a second to say thank you to everybody who watched that video and left me a comment with their ideas. I appreciate it beyond what I can express in mere words here. So thank you. Oh, and major story spoilers ahead, including some revelations pertaining to the Dragon's Tear questline. You've been warned. The idea that many have proposed to me has to do with time travel. At the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda, who is now in possession of a Zonai secret stone, unintentionally sends herself back in time into the ancient past of Hyrule's founding. Now, it's debated about which era this ancient past is, but that doesn't matter for this theory in particular. While in the past, she meets the king and queen of that era, Rauru and Sonia, as well as, and most importantly, Rauru's sister, Minoru. While the Zonai were said to be strong magic wielders, something Rauru himself demonstrates, Minoru had another talent. She was an expert on Zonai culture and technology, even designing impressive constructs of her own. When Zelda is transported back to the past and meets Minoru, she shows the Purapad to her new Zonai friend. And Minoru seems to be able to understand the technology to a degree, even while noting that it is not of that time period. In particular, she remarks on how she may be able to incorporate the Purapad's warping functions into their own technology. Just FYI, this is why Link, in the present day, is able to use Zonai shrines as warp points, because Minoru was able to make that compatible. With this in mind, and shrines sprouting up everywhere all of the sudden in the present day, many have suggested that Zelda altered the course of history through her actions here. By bringing modern technology into the past, she accelerated the development of Zonai technology and created a new timeline that effectively replaced the Sheikah with the Zonai as the forerunners of technological advancement. In this new timeline, the Sheikah technology never existed to begin with, which is why it is absent from Tears of the Kingdom. That's what people keep telling me. However, I'm not on board with this theory, and there are a number of reasons why. Instead, I would propose that this is more about predestination, that in the history of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda always had gone back in time and existed in the past in a closed time loop. While her actions had an impact on history, it did not alter that history. It always happened in this way. Let's look at the evidence. Our first piece of evidence for this is the fact that Breath of the Wild very much still happened before the events of Tears of the Kingdom, and there are a lot more reminders for this than people seem to be giving the game credit for. Sometime between games, Zelda traveled around Hyrule and had stone monuments constructed. These are memorial sites dedicated to and honoring those who lost their lives to the Great Calamity. Yeah, that calamity, the one we battled in the last game. If Breath of the Wild's history never happened, why would we need monuments to remember the lives lost? It's not just those monuments either. Our next point of interest lies in Kakariko Village, home of the modern-day Sheikah tribe, whose ancestors built that missing ancient technology. It's here that we'll find a particularly important tapestry. This is the same tapestry that Impa used in Breath of the Wild to illustrate to us the history of 10,000 years ago. It is the history of the previous battle against the Calamity, where the people of that age used the guardians and divine beasts to combat Ganon. If this technology never existed, this tapestry wouldn't either, but it is here in Impa's house. And if you've finished the Dragon's Tears quest, you'll find Impa here, and she'll say the following about it. Perhaps you recognize what is shown on that screen. It is a part of our history that must never be forgotten: the Calamity. The Calamity was the demon king of ancient times, brought back to existence in the form of hatred manifest. Some of our youths believe the Calamity to be mere legend. You and I know better, of course. Shown here are the royal princess with the power to seal away evil, and a warrior chosen by a legendary sword. This image depicts how, using 4 relics called divine beasts, built by our ancestors, they drove off the Calamity. If this ancient technology never existed, I don't think Impa would be name-dropping the divine beasts here. Further to this, in Hateno Village, we'll find Simon teaching at the newly built school. We can sit in on some of his lessons, and during a literal history lesson, Simon will recount not just the events of 10,000 years ago that was shown on that aforementioned tapestry, but also the events of Breath of the Wild itself. If the timeline had changed, none of this would be possible. The tapestry would not exist, and the divine beasts would not have been a part of that history, but they are. While we are here in Hateno, we can take a short walk up to the Hateno Ancient Tech Lab. In Breath of the Wild, this place was run by Purah and Simon, who were researching the ancient Sheikah technology. And what do we find here? A whole entire guardian, that's what. It is inactive, a husk, but it is here tethered to the roof of the lab. Not just that, but a number of Guardian Scout heads are placed around as decor as well. These may be the last remaining remnants of those relics, but they are still here. If we take a trip up north, we'll find ourselves in the heart of the Lanayru province, Zora's domain. It is here that we'll initially find the Zora facing yet another crisis, which is part of the main story, so I won't spoil that here. What I will share is that there are a handful of stone monuments left around the surrounding area, which were written by Sidon himself. In these writings, he reflects on his childhood, his fiancée Yona, his sister Mipha, and, you guessed it, the events of Breath of the Wild, that he played a part in, fighting alongside Link to save Zora's domain. Just for good measure, look, a statue of Link and Sidon. Does it look familiar? That's because this statue depicts the battle against divine beast Vah Ruta. If history changed and the ancient technology was never built, there would have been no divine beast to battle, and therefore no battle to write about or construct monuments of. There is actually plenty more dialogue that talks about what happened in Breath of the Wild and the role Link played in that. These Zora Stone monuments even recount the history of Ocarina of Time. But I think I've shown you a hopefully sufficient amount to disprove this theory. That said, I do have one more major piece of evidence for why this doesn't work, and it has to do with the time travel mechanics that the series has established. You see, a big reason I wanted to entertain this notion when I set out to write this video was because timelines splitting and changing history has happened in this series before. At the end of Ocarina of Time, for example, when Link is sent back in time by Zelda, he changes history while he is there, causing the timeline split between the new child timeline that he creates and the adult timeline that he was removed from. What he does not know at that time was that the world he was sent back from continued on without him, leading to the events of the Wind Waker, while his new timeline persisted into the events of Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess onward. So let's entertain the idea for a moment. Let's say hypothetically, if Zelda's actions in the past did change history, causing the Sheikah technology to have never been built, what would happen? The answer is nothing, because it was Zelda who was sent back in time and not Link. If Zelda had changed history, it would cause a timeline split, meaning that she would be in a new timeline. But we do not play from Zelda's perspective, we play from Link's perspective. He would have remained in the original timeline since he does not time travel here, and therefore he would not see or experience the changes made to history by Zelda. If she had altered history, we'd never know it. It would be as if she vanished, much in the same way as how the hero of time was said to have vanished and never re-emerged in the adult timeline leading up to the Wind Waker. This is more or less the same reason that Age of Calamity is seen as ambiguously canon. In that game, Tarako jumps back in time and warns Zelda and company of the impending calamity. And when he does so, he creates a new timeline. The events of Age of Calamity, therefore, are completely separate from Breath of the Wild. And in the era of the latter game, there is no Tarako in the modern age. There is nothing that happens in Age of Calamity that impacts the future of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. However, as we know from the Dragon's Tears quest, and again, spoiler warning, since Zelda becomes the Light Dragon and travels from the past to the present the long way, we know she remains a part of the original timeline. Otherwise, she wouldn't have made it here to deliver the Master Sword to Link. If this is hard to wrap your head around, imagine for a moment this. You're walking up a road. That road is the timeline. If Zelda is sent back in time, she has been sent back down the road. If she changed history, this would create a new timeline, meaning she would turn off that road. She wouldn't be able to meet back up the path with Link because she'd be on a separate path entirely. The Light Dragon couldn't exist, the Master Sword would never reach Link, and it would be as if she vanished. So the TLDR here is that it simply isn't possible for Zelda to have changed history and remain a part of this timeline. Had she done that, not only would it have created a new timeline, and we, the players, wouldn't have been a part of that, but none of the reminders of the Calamity or the ancient Sheikah technology would be here. Purah and Robbie wouldn't have been able to build the Skyview Towers either, since it's clearly made from scavenged materials like guardian legs, terminals, and elevator shafts from the shrines. None of those remnants or reminders would have been possible. So in short, Breath of the Wild and all of that history still happened. Oh, and there are the murals to consider, as well as Ganondorf recognizing Zelda at the start of the game. If she wasn't a part of that history already, Ganondorf wouldn't immediately see her and know her by name, not unless she was in his past, which she wouldn't have done yet. But based on these murals existing depicting Zelda in the past and Ganondorf recognizing her, we know that she always was a part of that history. Now, some have asked, well, where did the Sky Islands come from? Why wasn't the Light Dragon in Breath of the Wild? The cloud barrier obscuring these things is the simplest explanation. We see the Light Dragon ascend through a vortex in the clouds after she transforms. We don't see the ground from the Sky Islands at the beginning of the game. We don't see the Sky Islands from the ground at the beginning of the game, even though rubble is falling from them. So they did exist here, but weren't visible. And then there's this moment when the Light Dragon dispels the cloud barrier, and then suddenly the ground becomes visible, and the people on the surface can see the Sky Islands as well. Cloud barrier. It's magic. It's the same reason we can't see Skyloft from the ground in Skyward Sword. It's the same reason we can't see the city in the sky from the ground in Twilight Princess. Magic cloud barrier. Whether you want to debate about whether Skyward Sword is still canon or not, I believe it is. The cloud barrier is the simplest and cleanest explanation, in my opinion. So there you have it, friends. I hope this video didn't come across as me shooting down anybody's ideas. Truth be told, I went into writing this script with the intent of genuinely looking into the plausibility of this theory, because it was simply something so many commenters were suggesting to me. So I promise I really tried approaching it with an open mind, but the evidence just stacked up against it. Regardless, I hope you all found this video enlightening, or at the very least entertaining. Leave me your thoughts down below, and of course, thank you all so much for watching. Cheers! thank you all so much for watching. And an extra big thanks goes to my supporters across both Patreon and here on YouTube as a channel member. So thank you to Greymage, Brenda, Tetra, Hylian Wes, Justin, Midnight Naomi, and Bunny, as well as so many more people, the names of which you're seeing on screen here. Thank you all so much for all of the support. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.